Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. As always, let's start just by taking 3 breaths. My name is Opulence Abundance. I'm a speaker, a facilitator, and a conflict navigator. I love working with groups, organizations, both to provide trainings, not necessarily to prevent conflict, but to create conditions for generative conflict to emerge. And I also work with organizations, groups, individuals to transform conflict because conflict can both be destructive and tear us apart and cause a lot of issues, but conflict can also be something that pushes us to grow together and we can come out clearer, more honest, with much wisdom and lessons on the other side. And my own story of conflict navigation is rooted in being canceled and is rooted in just going through destructive conflict and also being an instigator of conflict. I tore apart so many groups that when I gained more skills, I was like, oh, I really have something to offer the world. Hi, Diana. I'm so glad you are here with us and can join. And we're about to start one of my favorite parts of these live sessions, which is I'm going to read aloud. And today I'm actually going to read from the Power Manual by Cindy Suarez. Shout out to Nisha for recommending this book to me. And I wanted to read aloud from this because power is, in my experience, kind of at the core of conflict and how we understand ourselves, whether that's power over or power under, can really inform how we move through the world. I am such an advocate of self accountability, but also rooting in our power. I think when we claim our power, we're able to take true self accountability. We can better see how we may have played into situations instead of seeing the world as happening to us. And I do think there's a nuance here because, unlike a lot of spiritual practitioners, I do think it's possible for us to be victimized. I think that bad things happen because in life, like sometimes bad things happen. I don't think it's necessarily because we are like not thinking good thoughts or that we cause all things or that I do think that other parties, people who harm us, also hold responsibility. So just want to give voice to that nuance before reading from the Power Manual. Okay, so we're going to read from chapter 4, The Sources of Power Relations. One learns about power as a child through one's interactions with other people. As a child, there were two things one sought in one's interactions with others: control over one's reality and affectionate connection. For example, if one's mother beamed at one, helped one, encouraged one to explore the world, and provided safety and love, then one may feel the world is a relatively safe place where one can expect to make connection, get one's needs met, and be loved. If, however, one's mother barely gave one attention, except to reprimand or worse, if she publicly humiliated one may feel the world is not a very safe place and that one should be careful and not expect others to be kind. Interactions also teach standards of value. Since age is one of the many ways that status is assigned in society, along with sex, race, class, and ability, as a child, one became aware of valuations of difference. As one grew, one also learned the corresponding expected ways of acting or the range within one which one could act. One goes through the stages of development. In each stage, one learns how to interact with and integrate experiences or not. Each developmental stage is accompanied by a crisis to be overcome. However, successful completion of each stage is not guaranteed. Unresolved crises bind psychic energy to the past. The child whose parents did not give her what she asked for may be used to not having her needs met. Her behaviors as an adult may then be suited to that condition. Following are the early development stages where one first learns about power and creates one's power story, the sense of oneself as powerful or powerless. In the first stage, between birth and 18 months, the crisis was trust versus mistrust. One learned that one was distinct from the external environment. One had to figure out whether other people would hear and respond adequately to one's needs. One's ability to have one's needs met in relationship fostered trust in the external world, and one's inability, mistrust. The second stage, between 2 to 3 years of age, was characterized by the crisis of autonomy versus shame. One developed a sense of what one wanted and whether one could get it. One learned about the setting of boundaries. This is what the 2 year olds know is about. The power to refuse includes the power to limit one's own desires in response to another no. If one was encouraged to assert one's will, one learned to negotiate one's boundaries. If one was discouraged, one may have learned to choose between denying one's feelings and denying external realities. The development of language, which happened in relationship, impacted one's ability to engage with one's environment in a manner that helped one get what one wanted or not. Language then is a tool of power. Between 3 to 5 years of age, initiative versus guilt. One attempted to link one's will to a goal. One's ability to imagine a desired future and then attain it reinforced one's developing identity as powerful. If one experienced the ability to initiate activity, one learned that one could make decisions and engage others. That one could sometimes be a leader. If one was not able to engage others in one's initiative, one may have felt embarrassed, guilty of being only a follower. In summary, if as a child one's development was nurtured and supported by age 5, one learned that one could have one's needs heard and answered, and one had a will and could assert it, and that one could create one's future and thus oneself. One learned a healthy sense of power. If not, one learned that one cannot count on getting one's needs met through relationships with others, that one cannot assert one's will, and that it is not easy to imagine a desired future or goal and attain it. Okay, so let's just take another breath and feel free to let me know via emoji how you felt about that reading. Also, hi, Zami. Thanks for sticking with us, being with us here today. I think this reading is quite well, one, the theory that this reading is referencing comes from the Stages of Development by Eric Erickson. I just want to name it's all a theory. The text makes it sound extremely authoritative. And the text kind of pushes this narrative forward that's like, you either had a healthy upbringing or an unhealthy one. And if it was healthy, you have a healthy relationship to power. If it was unhealthy, it's very difficult for you to conceptualize desire. I do think there's some truth in that, and it can be useful if you're someone with insecure or disorganized attachment, which I also identify in that camp, right? Like to be able to say, like, oh, maybe this speaks to the struggles I might have with my own sense of self, with verbalizing boundaries, and with conceptualizing desire. I do want to pull out that there's a way that this text and this theory really uplifts an individualistic society. And it really almost pathologizes communities created by people of color. And I say that thinking about my own childhood in a South Asian household where I was often told what my desires and needs were. And the idea that I would have my own, in my experience, in my family, that was just maybe not so much of a thing. And I just want to name that, like, we can both notice how our skill sets are different than peers who maybe grew up in more traditional households, and also resist the urge to demonize. So just want to hold some space for that, for the individualism that is present in the text, but also want to kind of talk about how our sense of self, how we conceptualize ourselves, our early childhood experiences, how those things might link back to how we create a grounded nervous system. And I think it's so interesting because I think our nervous systems are looking for cues of safety. And one way we create safety is actually by surrounding ourselves with other nervous systems, right? We have our herd. And so being in community, growing up and living with other people or with other creatures, animals, pets, and being able to co regulate. That is one way that our nervous system stays in balance. I think about how when I go on vacation and my cat isn't around, it's so hard for me to sleep. And I think it's because my body and my subconscious are actually searching out that nervous system that I'm very familiar with. And the presence of my cat's nervous system allows me to rest. Similarly, on the weekend, when I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to sleep in or I'm going to keep sleeping, I'm not going to get up, I'll notice that sometimes my cat will nap with me and I can feel our nervous systems kind of feeding each other, which is why when we are in a place of being very activated, often when we get very, very activated, we need to engage in some sort of somatic release. Welcome, friend. We need to engage in some sort of somatic release, right? Whether that's shaking, going on a walk, ranting, screaming, making some sort of visceral expression. And then we can kind of come down. We might either plunge into what would be called like a hypoarousal state, where after we're activated, we're feeling adrenaline, heart's beating. We might then find ourselves yawning, feeling intense exhaustion, glazed over, super dissociated. And then after that, we might be able to go to sleep, walk it off, and then we might come back into a normalized state. Something that can help us come back is actually being around or talking to people we love. And it's not so much the words or what we say, but even just being around someone who is regulated, feeling their breath, it allows our body to have something to match. And when I teach de-escalation, oh, welcome, friend. When I teach de-escalation, one of the things that I talk to people about is how the whole point of de-escalation is matching, is like the whole point of de-escalation is for my nervous system to bring down someone else's nervous system, which is why when a crisis goes off and you escalate and then someone else escalates, as the de-escalator, you have to ground yourself. You have to self-regulate so that you can bring this escalated person down to you. A unregulated adult will never de-escalate an unregulated adult. What happens in that situation is people actually build higher. And it can get quite overwhelming. So, okay. So we're kind of going over, how do we ground? What are the ways that we can ground and stay grounded? And so one is seeking out someone we trust who is regulated. And there's an emphasis on someone we trust, because what can happen in childhood, what can happen in life is that there might be people that we feel obligation to, people we grew up with, but we ultimately don't feel safe with. And then when we're around them, we're actually dissociated. We're actually feeling unregulated, but it's familiar. And so we get what's called like an overcoupling, We think we're grounded, but we're with someone who actually makes us feel unsafe. And that's where we have things like fawn responses happen. So making sure that you're with someone, and it doesn't even need to always be someone you feel super close with, which is why after a regulating event, going somewhere like an exercise class might be an ideal. But when we return to this topic of like, how do we nurture a grounded baseline? How do we nurture a resilient nervous system? A healthy nervous system should be able to activate and deactivate and, without, and then return to baseline. That's what we always want. When the activation is so high that we're pulled out of our center and we can't come back down, that's kind of an issue. And when we're super activating all the time, even when things are not true threats, that's also an issue. So here are some quick things that can help tone our nervous system. One is singing, humming, self massage. All of these things are a great way to connect our body to our body. We can also read. Reading for 30 minutes a day is actually proven to increase nervous system resilience. Um, and we can also meditate. We can find our baseline of safety and comfort and practice taking those intentional breaths. So, we're just going to close out today with a somatic activity to support our grounded baseline. Thank you to everyone who joined today. And this activity is just massaging our ears. We're just going to take a moment and massage our earlobes, just massaging up and down the ear, really rubbing. Yes, yes. Oh, I can feel the desire for a yawn coming on. And yawns are wonderful. Yawns help us know that we are in rest and digest instead of fight and flight. So we celebrate a yawn. Thank you so much for joining me today for this live, for learning more about how you can have a more regulated nervous system. Again, my name is Opulence Abundance. I'm a speaker, a facilitator. And if you want to learn more, please, please, I invite you to join my newsletter where I talk a lot about these concepts. Thank you so much for joining today. Bye. Oh.